This is 40K Today. Thanks to the new rules, when you're an engagement range of this podcast, you can still operate on your top profile. Hashtag new 40K.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 40K Today, the show that covers anything and everything in our wonderful hobby. I'm your host, Seamus Ronan, and today we'll be getting a meta recap from Peter the Falcon himself, as well as a fantastic little hobby tip from George Thompson. All right, enough talk. Let's get on with the show. First up is Peter the Falcon from 40K Stats Center. Even though there haven't been too many events in 9th, there have been a few, and the guys at the Stats Center are more than eager to see what conclusions they can find. Our very own John Damaris got to catch up with the Falcon and hear his insights.
Caw-caw! Welcome back, Falcon. How are you, sir?
Caw-caw! Feeling good, buddy. Feeling good. How's life?
I love that we are absolutely blowing our listeners' eardrums out. Life is great. Let's talk about 40K, though. Now, obviously, there has not been a lot of events, so I get that. But have you got a chance to sort of curate the data that you do have a little more? Do you have any insights you want to share with the greater 40K populace out there?
Sure. So there have been 7 GT/major/ what I'm calling GT light events that have happened since launch. So I'm still only looking at 5 rounds for events. I'm trying to keep it as close to 28 as possible, but I have kind of lowered my standards to 20 to 24 in terms of just because of COVID. And I still want to see this data to see where the events, see where like competitive 40K is headed.
Right.
With that in mind, we've only really seen about 600 unique games played in competitive 40K.
Which is not statistically super relevant, but it does at least give us something to talk about.
It does. So, like for me, as someone, I've been doing this for about 2.5 years. Generally, once I hit about 2,000 games, you can really get like into the nitty gritty of this is where each faction is, or the majority of them at least, right? Outside of those 1 or 2 kind of like really low played factions, you can generally see at 600. There are a couple factions where you really can get a decent eye on where they're sitting. And usually that's going to be the extreme outliers. So Salamanders, I think everybody knows, have been overperforming. Of the 7 events we've had, they've won 4 of them. They won another one this last weekend, the Varberg GT in Sweden. It's 26 players, Salamanders and White Scars combination, but it was majority Salamanders. Took that event, Christoph Fiedler. On top of that, you've had Alex Harrison win 2 events with Salamanders. Dan Salmons won the Flying Monkey Major with Salamanders. Second place of that event was Salamanders as well. So, like, they've definitely been performing very well, and they are tops across the board in all statistics that I look at. Of the 56 games that we have recorded, so it's still not what I would call a very significant amount. They've got a 74% win rate. So, which is very high, way higher than I normally like to see. Like generally,
yeah, I mean that's a good 10 points higher than other problematic lists that we've had in the past, right?
Exactly.
Like 65% is where we're like, whoa, this is a problem.
Like I like to see factions between about 47 and 53. In the past, when we had lots of data, if you got over 53, the faction was generally a little too strong. Once you broke into that 58 plus mark, you were a definite issue, like in the past. So at 74, Salamanders definitely showing that that they are, at least ahead above most of the other factions right now in terms of play.
I want to caveat really hard with that though, because we don't have enough data. It may normalize some as we get more.
It may normalize down, but
games.
I still think you're going to see them being in the tops. At this point, they are so far above everybody else that have at least enough games where you can say maybe this is where they should be, that I think you're looking at, Salamanders are probably top dog. There might be a list that we haven't seen yet because 6 or 7 events, like you said, and you and I have talked about this off Mike. It's still not enough data to be sure, but they are definitely well above. Their average victory points per game is 78, which is about 3. It's about 5 points higher than any faction that has any like amount of play. Their average opponent's victory points is only 54, which is about 5 points lower than everybody else. So so they're definitely playing the missions a lot better than everybody else, at least the people that are using them. And their average first loss is, I believe, something like 3.7. which is
that's insanity.
3.9. Sorry, 3.9. So they are.
So they almost get to 4-0 before they lose a game.
Yeah, this is what we saw with Iron Hands. The difference was with Iron Hands. Within a week we had almost 200 Iron Hands games to look at. Right after their launch, because they were so popular and they were that much better than everybody else. With COVID, it's hard to say. I don't think they would be this strong. I'd like to believe, looking at how these games are playing out when you watch them on stream, that people do have a chance. Unlike what we saw with Iron Hands when they were that strong, but still, like, Salamanders definitely the top dog. And on the other end, for like bottom performing factions, our poor little guardsmen boys are really struggling. We've had about 80 to 90 games worth of data now from Guard in these tournaments. They're sitting at a 33% win rate, just about 34. Their average score against them is just shy of 75. It's the highest of everybody's. This is one of the highest played factions, right? Like, the only faction that's seen more play are Death Guard and Custodes. If you split the Marines into their individual supplements, Marines are by far the most played if you add them all together.
Right.
But yeah, and so Guard are definitely, they're at the bottom in pretty much every statistic other than like the average VP per game.
Somebody get on the bat phone and tell Brandon Grant to get out to some events stat.
Well, I mean, he recently did that invitational and he switched over to Sisters of Battle. So Brandon, you're killing me. John Lennon's been doing a pretty cool Scions list that I think probably has some play in competitive play. Can a lot of people take that and break a 33% win rate? I don't know. I hope so. But yeah, so we're starting to see a couple factions start to solidify in their positions. Like, it seems very, very probable Salamanders are top tier, if not the top tier. Guard are definitely in that bottom row, unless someone comes up with something we haven't seen yet.
Are we due for a fall fact? Do you think the Salamanders might get adjusted there, potentially?
I think there's an FAQ needed for one or two things from Salamanders. Mm-hmm. We do have that Space Marine Codex coming in October, which may tone down parts of their lists, but it may also boost up others. So who knows? I think the only other faction we really have like a ton of data on is Custodes, and they seem to be really like just slightly above mid par, which is a faction that a lot of people have seen as like a top tier faction coming in. But at least so far, they're sitting at about a 52% win rate. They are the most played faction if you split Marines up. We already have almost 150 games recorded with them in competitive play. Oof. And their average first loss is about a 1.7, which is very low. Usually when we see that, it's they're an underperformer. But what we're seeing, and it was something I brought up last time I was on, is Custodes do look like they are they're like the Imperial Knights of 8th edition. Once they had a couple FAQs where they would easily go 4-1 at events, but their first loss was often in like the second round. They'd beat their first opponent bloody, end up against Blood Angels or something that were a hard counter, lose to that, and then win the rest of their games. Right. And I think we're seeing that a little bit with Custodes too, where they have these lists that do so well, but then there's that, that one like Harlequin or Salamanders list that they didn't build for, and just everything is damage 3 in it, and it kills them, right? So
it's all damage 3 and high AP, right? And then
exactly.
They just melt.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess they have their kryptonite.
Yep. So it's interesting to see where the games are going. There's a couple more events coming up in the next week or two. So hopefully we'll at least shortly be able to solidify a few more factions. I've got a lot of data for Tau, but a lot of it was prior to the Taunar getting nerfed, and the Taunar was like the Tau list. So it was everywhere for a couple of events, and then once it went up 300 points, it disappeared. So I don't really trust the Tau data yet. Death Guard are showing really poor performances for being a very popular faction. I'm not sure if this is an orc thing where, there's a lot of people with Death Guard because it was the starter for 8th edition, and so they're bringing them out because they're told it's really good, but the quality of players isn't there. Because we saw Joni Velasquez or Charles Velasquez at Flying Monkey go 5-1 with them, so that they can perform. It's just
TJ Lanigan is
Lanigan's
reveling in Death Guard right now. So
Don Huson's talking them up for days. Like, all the there's a lot of really good Chaos players that haven't been able to go to events. So I'm quite sure that a lot of this will change, but we are starting to see like little tidbits of light, right? So we can say, you know, Salamanders definitely top tier. Are they S tier? Are they A tier? However you want to call it. Probably.
It looks like it, yeah. I mean, anything that has a 75% win rate in a game where you're aiming for 50-50, that's a problem. And I mean, they've played enough games. I mean, it could come down because as the adoption of Salamanders, like as people see them doing well, more people will adopt them, and it could just be some really good players are playing it right now because they identified them as being strong.
For sure. I mean, like I've said, and this kind of goes to if anybody read that very popular Goonhammer article where they went through the statistics for Go First, they touched a little bit on win rates. They were looking at only 4 or 5 events as well, so 300 games worth of data. You can't really talk too much about that. But it's the same idea where you have multiple events in the same area, and even now, like 2 or 3 out of the UK, all of a sudden that skews things one way because Alex Harrison went to all of them. We're going to have Iron Monkey come out soon, and that's probably going to skew the data because it's the exact same people that went to Iron Monkey,
Iron
Halo.
Yeah,
same people that went to Flying Monkey, same people that went to the like Wizards Asylum GT, which was the first GT. So you have all this overlap, right?
So that's a fair point. So if I understand what you're saying that there's only a few locales running tournaments. Like there's an Australian near Perth. There's the area where Alex Harrison is playing, and then in the Midwest, right? So what we're getting is a skewed picture of what the worldwide meta is because it's literally just 3 metas right now. I mean, there's probably a little more than that. But
I mean, we've had like Sweden just had that event. There's going to be more coming. I was talking to Neil Kerr from the WTC. There's 3 or 4 events coming in the next month or so, I believe, maybe 6 weeks out of that area. So we're going to see a lot of that WTC kind of Eastern European, Northern European meta come out a little more. So we'll get to see if that changes things. It's not like it was, pre-COVID where everywhere was having events. We're getting 8 a week and we could really see this. But so we're getting like this very like geospatial style data as well, which skews things dramatically. I'm very curious to see where everything goes. I'm excited to see where everything goes. Best Coast Pairings is about to launch their scorecard, which they'll be able to track things like secondaries as well.
Oh, think of all that data. Are you excited?
I'm very excited. I've talked to Josh Diffie a little bit about it and Adam Camilleri. I'm hoping, crossed fingers, that I can beg them enough to see it in some fashion. I don't know if I have to sign a waiver or kill a person to get it, but I'll do what I need to do to see the numbers and be able to crunch them.
Oh man, Peter, you do so much for the entire community. I just want to take a second to thank you for it.
Don't do this. I don't like it.
You're the greatest, and you should restart your Patreon, and people should go support it. So he's going to restart it. He's going to give me a link to it. We're going to put it in the show notes, and we'll go from there. Peter, thank you so much.
Hey, no problem, bud. Thanks for having me.
That was John with Peter the Falcon. I have a feeling we'll have a lot of happy Salamanders players after this news. I feel like we can all expect a lot of mean green space marines in our future. Next up, a hobby tip.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
Basing our miniatures is a big part of our hobby, and it can really make the paint job come to life. Best part is, we can use almost anything, whether it be static grass, gravel, or even sticks from the backyard. But today, we'll be focusing on cork. Our very own Tanya Gates got to sit down with George Thompson and pick his brain about using cork on his bases.
I'm here today talking with George. He is part of the BC Battle Brothers and the Beyond the Battlefield podcast, and he's here to give us a hobby tip on how we can get our armies battle ready a little bit easier. So thank you so much for being on the show today, George.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And you're going to be telling us all about cork and how we can find it and how we can use it so that we can make our models look beautiful. So I'm just going to let you take that away.
Oh, I tell you, I nerd out a little bit when I talk about cork. I don't know if my family looks at me the same way when wine bottles open these days because I'm quick to grab them off the counter and shove them in my pocket. Cork is what I think can help us easily take our basing projects to the next level and get ourselves battle ready with less effort and less cost. Because chances are cork is kicking around in your house or easily accessible in your community. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can easily source cork and how you can easily use it to base your models to a battle-ready standard quickly. I made a joke about the wine, but that's not just a joke. That's true. One of the easiest places to find cork is out of those liquor bottles, and we know there's a lot of them kicking around these days with COVID. So take advantage of that. Grab them, throw them in a bag, stick them in your hobby box, whatever you got to do. They might come in handy at some point. I also found that my wife loves to go to garage sales. I don't know, how do you feel about garage selling, Tanya? Are you a fan?
No, it's not really my
No,
thing.
it's not a thing. Well, it wasn't mine either. And until I realized that I might actually be able to get some enjoyment out of it by secretly sourcing cork from things like table toppers for hot plates to keep them from wrecking tables. They make great sources for cork. And finding cork of all different dimensions and consistency can help make your basing projects a little bit more varied and a little bit more realistic, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So once you have all your cork, I should mention as well, another great place to get is the dollar store. You can get sheets of it for like $1 a pop. And that can come in handy when you're looking at your larger basing projects, like doing a display board and needing to create a rocky outcropping across a 2 by 2 foot surface. So yeah, I know I make light of that, but cork can be a great way to coat a display board. Cork sheets that I was talking about from the hobby shop are naturally flat, and that flat surface can emulate things like sandstone or rocky slate or an arid desert. It can be rocky outcroppings under a snow-covered tundra. Really, your imagination is the limit. When cork sometimes got a bit of a bad rap when it was excessively overused to create those giant plinths that are independent characters back in 6th edition and earlier used to stand upon and stand above everybody on the battlefield. But I would hesitate to overuse cork. I think where cork is secretly most effective is when you use it sparingly. And when you break it up so that it looks a little bit more realistic, not that your entire army is riding upon cork magic carpets, but that they are walking amidst broken rubble. And so I recommend looking at your base surface. So if you're looking at a base that's 32 millimeters, try to break off chunks of cork that are going to be together capable of covering that 32 millimeter surface. But by fitting them together like puzzle pieces, you're going to give yourself a bit more of an arid look or a natural look amongst that cork. And because it's relatively flat, you can probably glue your miniature right on top of it after you've either pre-prepped and painted it, or you can do it all at once like I do. Put them together, finished base ready for priming, and paint the whole thing at once. It's really whatever your preference is. Cork is also a great medium for pinning your models. So you can throw a pin in each of the feet of your models that you're going to stand upon that cork and stab it right in, provided that those pins are as long as the cork is thick. Part of the reason why I like to get lots of different sized corks and consistency is you can apply different sizes to also make your bases look more realistic. And all of this might sound overwhelming, but it takes very little effort. It can take a few minutes, some super glue, and you have yourself a very rocky, believable, and interesting base that is going to create a lovely frame for your model once it's painted.
I love all of this, but I'm just going to cut you off there because I feel like you're trying to give me a hint. So George was actually the guy who judged my painting at the last tournament, and I didn't have a display board. And I feel like all of this is directed at me in a personal attack. So you know what? I'm gonna take all of this and I'm going to make a display board that is going to make you proud at the next tournament, George.
Oh, I honestly thought I could sneak that one by you, Tanya, but you're absolutely right. This is all directed at you and is secret coaching that you wouldn't take that day. But hopefully you will now, because I had you captive for 5 whole months. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the show, George.
That was our own Tanya Gates with George Thompson. It seems to me like cork is much more versatile than I once thought. With a little creativity and a steady hand, you can emulate so many different surfaces. The sky is really the limit with this stuff. You know what time it is. It's time for the model of the day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
Yesterday we featured an Imperial Fist captain, and today we've got a Kit Bash Tau captain who seems to have brought him down. This conversion comes from For the Imperial Greater Good on Instagram, and it is phenomenal. The white and red color scheme is brought to life with crispy highlights. The cool blue glow from the datapad is subtle yet effective, and the drakeskin cloak just ties it all together. Near his hooves lies a helmet from an Imperial Fist that could not best the might of the Tau Empire, although the yellow does add a nice bit of contrast to the model. If you have a model that you think should be featured, or you've seen a model that you think should be featured, just let us know, or tag your Instagram posts with hashtag 40K2day. We love seeing what our listeners are up to, and we know we have plenty of talented listeners out there. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in yet again. Big thanks go to our content producer, Alex Bainter, and our social media whiz, Tanya Gates. For John, Paul, Steve, and the rest of the team, I'm Seamus Ronan, and that's what's happening at 40K Today.